Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. I'm Tom Keene, along with Paul Sweeney. Join us each day for insight from the best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. You can also watch the show live on YouTube. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to see the show weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern from our global headquarters in New York City. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen, and always on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Terminal, and the Bloomberg Business app. Joining us right now, she's with Airbus Ventures. She's not with Airbus, although she likes the beluga, but she's with Airbus Ventures. Nicole Conner joins us here on investment in all of this. Is there too much money chasing too few ideas, or the other way around?
I'd say it's the other way around. There's so many opportunities right now, and I think this is a really special time for venture capital and for these startups who are working on taking these important emerging technologies out of the lab and into the real world. At our fund, we're investing in everything from autonomy to electrification, the low carbon economy, new space, advanced materials, quantum computing, networking, and sensing. And as we've seen at Climate Week, there's no end to the number of startups who are trying to solve these important challenges.
You have a wonderful transatlantic view at Airbus Ventures. What I see when I'm in London or Paris is a huge success or belief in the future of climate versus a hugely fractious United States debate on climate. Describe that debate and how it affects investment.
What we see is that we're investing in seed to Series B companies who are working on bricks of technology that are hoping to solve this challenge. We are uniquely positioned as one of the few global VC funds. We're investing all over the world. And what we see is an optimism on seeing how these technologies can help shape the future of tomorrow. Some of these technologies that will be changing products, in decades' time. We have a very optimistic view on the current environment.
Help me with the term deep technology. So you invest in deep technology entrepreneurship. Yeah. What does it mean, and sort of how does that set you apart from other VC shops?
We're investing in the hardest engineering problems to solve. And the deep tech investment practice is extremely important in unlocking these opportunities down the chain. So when you think about one of our portfolio companies who's sitting in the Brooklyn Navy Yard called QNect. They're working on quantum networking hardware. This is a product suite that will sit on existing telecom infrastructure to allow for quantum communications. Why that matters is that's ultra secure communication. So the national security sector is very interested in seeing even if you can use their product suite to see if someone is tapping the line. And ultra secure communication matters for so many industries: finance, defense, national security, of course. So that's where we're focused on. How can we work on using these bricks of technology to unlock other problems?
Nicole, we'll get Tom over to the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Maybe we'll get you to Brooklyn at some point.
There's lobsters over
there.
there.
There's bagels, lobsters. A great meal while we're there.
It's an incredible community over there.
Tell me about your background. I mean, you are somebody's a lawyer. You're based in D.C. I remember talking with Steve Case a while back about sort of broadening the reach of VC beyond Boston, beyond the Bay Area. What added value perspective does that give you, being based in Washington versus those other places?
Well, certainly in the areas that we're investing, these are all on the critical and emerging technologies list for the US. So many of our portfolio companies, they are in and out of DC, meeting with their customers, the agencies, the aerospace primes in Northern Virginia, have meetings on the Hill. I think there is a strong appetite to better understand how these technologies can be plugged into other areas and challenges that we have. I would say with my background, what we like to say within our fund is that we have a Swiss Army knife of a team. Founders have no end to the challenges that they need to navigate. And so yes, I bring my financial and operational background. We have aerospace engineers, mechanical engineers, physicists, all of whom are working with our founders to get their technologies out into the market.
You are living the skepticism of America over climate change. In this election, David's expert on the election, I'm not, but you go state to state, it's almost an unmentionable by the two candidates. How does America become more like Europe in climate change, or do you suggest we stay distant from the enthusiasm?
I think it's important to focus on the technologies themselves, because in the debate, it's getting lost. Like, for example, we could look at hydrogen aircraft. These are exciting opportunities. This is what the market wants, is they want to have novel ways of flying that has less climate impact. And so we like to stay out of the noise and in terms of any debate on this, because we think the technologies will show themselves.
What do folks need to know just about the environment for venture capital at this point? We've been through a couple of years when the environment wasn't as great as it had been. Where are we in the arc of sort of its energy or success, or how does it feel at this moment, being in VC?
Feeling optimistic, actually. I think that there's a lot. It's important right now, and we as a fund want to really bring the expertise into bringing these technologies out. And so I think it's important that right now we're seeing VC funds who have special expertise really focused on the founders. And I think the interest rate helps. Yes. It certainly helps, and so we're feeling good, and I think hopefully getting through the election process itself will.
I've got my question of the day. It's a shock worldwide that Microsoft is going to team up for electrical generation through 3 Mile Island with Constellation Energy. How did you react when you saw that? I mean, talk about a jump condition for energy, or energy generation, I should say.
Yeah. I think it's just reflective of the fact that companies are eager for anyone to find solutions for the energy crisis that they have. I mean, if you think about AI, there's a huge amount of energy consumption in order to run some of these models. And so it's unsurprising that they're looking for any particular technology that can help solve their problem.
Nicole, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Nicole Conner,
Enjoy the conference
with us with Airbus Ventures today, getting us started here at the Earthshot Prize Awards. This is a joy. He is someone at Morgan Stanley who's done the tour of duty, and very rarely do you see such an extended commitment to one project. That project, well, maybe it's not as iconic as the Dow Jones Industrial Average, but within global Wall Street, MSCI is understood by all. Henry Fernandez joins us this morning with your baby, MSCI. What was it like the first years of MSCI, where you had to go into every meeting and explain, what are we doing there? Now you own emerging market and global index analysis.
So I created the company 30 years ago on top of the, what was then the Morgan Stanley Capital International indices. And that was the only product we had, right? Market cap indices. And it was a cost center, so we didn't have a lot of resources. And the world wanted a lot from us. Mm-hmm. So we had to, educate a lot of people and expand, and eventually bought a lot of companies and spun out of Morgan Stanley, and it's a $40 billion market cap company today.
You are focused on the innovation here of the countability of data over to the climate challenges we have. How are you going to bring your data acumen over to a better measurement of our climate disaster?
So clearly, climate risk is an existential risk for all of us. But in the capital industry, you can decimate portfolios. There will be winners and losers, and all of them under your portfolio today. So the question is, how are you going to discern who those are, and how are you going to start transitioning to a low carbon portfolio? So it's a lot of it a question of measurement. So what's the nature of your problem? Where is the carbon emissions? Where are the big climate risks? What do you do about it? Where do you start? Do you start in private assets, in public assets? And very importantly, at what pace do you go? If you go too fast, you're going to underperform. And if you
Is Europe gone too fast?
Huh?
Is Europe gone too fast?
No. I mean, nothing in the world is going too fast. For, the Paris Agreement put a date of 2050 because we needed to get 200 countries to agree. But it was so far out that, people think that this is a long-term problem. Of course it is a long-term problem, but it's also a short to medium-term problem. We already see an enormous physical risk around the world.
I mean, you've got a risk in Brooklyn that your house could flood away, right?
Well, thankfully we're not at the bottom floor, but yes.
If the East River gets any bigger,
erode,
there goes the GuraSeptember.
Make its way up Park Slope. I remember talking to Anne Finucane on her last day at Bank of America about ESG, something about which she's so passionate and has been for so long. And we talked about the issue of standardization, that companies trying to keep up with this kind of data have so many ways in which they're filing or making filings known. Help me understand that, where we are in that process of winning and simplifying data when it comes to ESG and climate issues in particular. Is it still too much of a Wild West than it should be?
No, really there is, first of all, ESG is investment risk and opportunity.
Yes.
It's turned politicized, into political philosophies, but it's about understanding the capital markets and the risk associated with it with additional information, right, in terms of non-financial information, as you know well. Secondly, unfortunately, we call them ratings, and we have a metric system that is similar to credit ratings. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people think that there has to be convergence of the ratings, just like credit ratings have convergence, where credit ratings are unidimensional. It's about cash flows and the stability of the cash flows. So how far can you be between different people, right, in terms of the rating? ESG measures a huge number of various things. So it's almost like a sell-side opinion.
Yes.
So therefore, it's very hard to think that you're going to end up with, standardization of the ratings, because my opinion at MSCI may be different than our competitors' opinion. They may think that governance is more important. We may think that climate is more important. The key is not on the ratings. The key is to make sure the quality of the data.
Henry Fernandez with us with MSCI here at the Earthshot Prize, the Plaza Hotel. David?
Let's talk about sort of one area in particular, the sort of voluntary carbon credit market. I know that MSCI has kind of looked at the integrity of that data, rated that data. How representative is that of the work that you're doing when it comes to climate in particular? And what did you find kind of looking at those data in particular?
So first of all, we believe strongly that voluntary carbon markets have to be part of the process of the risk in the portfolios of the world and the world itself. Every place else we go, markets serve a function of transferring value and transferring risk. And in climate, we're going to say they don't play any function. It's crazy to think that they won't. The issue is how do we build integrity and understanding that what you buy is what you thought you were buying and all of that. So we have come up with ratings. We have 4,000 projects right now that we're rating. We just announced that last week. And we're going to bring more integrity, more data, and quality.
How do you rating something in Chengdu, China? Explain to me the data veracity we can bring to the distrust around what China's doing in carbon management, in coal management. Are you optimistic that we can get a handle on that?
Well, I was just in Chengdu, China, a couple of months ago to begin with, but importantly...
Did you go see the pandas?
Absolutely.
Good. Okay. That's a number one thing we've learned from Henry Fernandez here this morning.
Yeah. And but it's not different that how we classify countries, how we classify ESG companies. How we look at carbon. So we collect an enormous amount of data from independent sources, and then we sort of package it into a classification system of the various sources. And then, we create the ratings.
For our American audience, coast to coast, thank you this morning for listening and tuning in on YouTube as well. There's a belief here that China's cheating. Does MSCI have the data amount or veracity to say that China is or is not cheating, or any other country for that matter?
Well, they could be cheating in many different aspects, obviously. But in our case, we have incredible sources of independent data. The global press, the local press, sometimes is obviously controlled, to find independent sources and verify those sources like a newspaper would, to understand what is the nature of the climate emissions of a company, what is the nature of ESG, what is the nature of, in the west of China and all of that. And it doesn't make us popular in China necessarily, but we have an independent view. And an unbiased view, and that's how we rate everything, including in China, right? But it's not different than Indonesia, sometimes not different than Nigeria, not different than Mexico, and the like.
A last question here, just given your perspective, having traveled to the bamboo forest in Chengdu and elsewhere, what don't we understand about emerging markets today? Sort of coming out of the pandemic, as we see the world reopening again, what are people misunderstanding or not understanding about sort of the health of?
First of all, emerging market is a catch-all.
Yes.
Right? So you have to then break it down into commodity exporting markets, consumer markets, and markets that don't have a lot of competitive advantages, right? Secondly, is emerging markets are where the demographics, growth is in the world. They have a lot of problems, obviously. The emerging markets is where the climate problem will be the biggest,
acute, yeah.
because they don't have a lot of resources. But they also present significant opportunities, in the world. So there is a little bit of too much of a gloss over, emerging markets that you need to go more in depth into each category and understand Brazil is different than Turkey, different than China, right?
Thank you so much.
Nice to see you.
I'd like to continue this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'd love to see you over at Bloomberg. Henry Fernandez with us here with MSCI. On the politics of the moment, there's no one better than David Gura to be looking state by state. But when you slice and dice 50 states for this election of November 5th, there's no question Colorado can be front and center with a really rich and interesting politics. I like the ballot that the governor of Colorado put as a ballot initiative, which is to bring back Tulagis in Boulder, Colorado. The shutting down of Tulagis as a club was a national scandal. I hope he can bring Tulagis back.
We'll get into that. We'll let Tom wax nostalgic about his time at the Sink, his time on the Hill. Maybe we'll talk about Tom's Tavern on Pearl Street as well. But we're here at the Earthshot Summit at the Plaza Hotel on this Tuesday morning. With us now, the 43rd governor of the state of Colorado, Jared Polis, who is, of course, a supporter of and a surrogate for the Harris-Walz campaign. And Governor Polis, great to speak with you. And I got to start with what has been in the news. We talked about it just a moment ago. That is the degree to which Aurora, Colorado has been in the news. And I saw an interview on KUSA on 9 News in Colorado. Your former congressional colleague, Mike Kaufman, now the mayor of that city, evincing a kind of unease as he was asked about whether he would stand by former President Trump as he came to Aurora for a rally to address what he's been talking about over and over again. That is what's really an apparition here, the dangers, the dangers as he describes them of Venezuelan gangs in that city. Give us a sense of what's really happening on the ground there in Aurora.
Well, I mean, the way the former president talks about it is, frankly, one of the reasons he's so unpopular here. I mean, Aurora is a thriving city. I was there last week. Most residents are enjoy living in one of our most culturally diverse cities in the state. Violent crime has been down 2 years in a row. Car thefts are way down 2 years in a row. They have a new police chief. We've been working with them on law enforcement for a number of different years. So, I mean, that's the reality in Aurora. And then you have somebody talking about it like it's some alternate reality place, and Coloradans just sort of roll their eyes and say, that's not us.
Governor, we look at the latest polling, which has gotten pretty granular, especially on the state-by-state level, looking at the issues that matter most to voters. And chief among them in the latest set of polls we've gotten has been the economy, has been inflation. What are you hearing from Coloradans about that? And what more does the ticket you support need to do to make the case that they're going to make life better for those who are still struggling, still dealing with the effects of high inflation and higher prices?
Certainly, high costs and inflation are one of the big challenges we face, and I think that the type of thing that we saw from the Wharton School, Penn came out and said that Donald Trump's big spending plan would increase the deficit more than 2 times more than Kamala Harris's plan. People understand that this kind of big spending mentality is inflationary. That's more of what the former president brought last time he was president. It's what he's likely to bring again. I think Kamala Harris has a responsible plan. It encourages entrepreneurship, innovation, really leans into the opportunity economy from the bottom up, and doesn't rely on big government spending like Donald Trump.
Governor, you were living there for decades, way back before this fractious politics, the Latino vote and the turnout. What is your prediction for the size of the Latino vote in Colorado, and particularly the youth vote that many say finds an affection with the former president?
There's a lot more excitement now with Kamala Harris as the nominee. I think this was a legitimate problem when Joe Biden was talking about running again, especially among the younger vote. I think we now have a candidate that really speaks to a new generation, to their aspirations, to their goals. And I'm getting a lot of excitement, whether I'm at our campuses at CU and DU and CSU, or whether it's at our community colleges or in stores and in restaurants. I think people really get that she has an agenda that works for them. Our Latino population in Colorado is incredibly diverse, right? We have people that have been, families that have been here hundreds of years. We have families that arrived here a generation or two ago. Like any group, there's a broad political diversity among them. Overwhelmingly, of course, Latino voters, just like all Coloradans, are supporting Kamala Harris and what she offers to bring down inflation, secure our border, and help grow opportunity.
Governor, you've gotten to know the vice president's running mate through his service in the Democratic Governors Association. I imagine you've gotten to know him well over the course of that. Tom asked me yesterday on air sort of what he can bring to states like Arizona and Colorado. As he makes his way along that campaign trail, and it's bound to get busier, what do voters want to hear from him? What does he offer that the vice president doesn't, that the incumbent president didn't offer before him? What's he able to do to kind of galvanize or energize the electorate there in Colorado?
So, Tim Walz was somebody I served with in the United States Congress as well. This is somebody who won a red district in United States Congress. How? By really understanding and being authentic with people. I mean, this is a guy who can get along with almost anybody. He's comfortable in his own skin. He's able to hear people where they're at and help them imagine a better world for themselves and others. So that's really who Tim is, and through his service to our country in the military as a teacher, he's really put his work where his mouth is, and people are really excited across the country to get to know him as our next vice president.
Governor, how do you feel about the tradition? And I'm going to go back to Ronald Reagan, who maybe was on the right and ran to the center. In the days to November 5th, are we going to see the vice president run to the middle and become verbally less progressive and more centrist, as maybe we see from Jared Polis?
Well, look, I mean, she is who she is. She obviously evolves on issues and learns just like any of us do. It's a different job to be a DA. It's a different job to be a senator from California. It's a different job to be vice president. And it's a different job to want to be the next president of all America. And that's really what she's leading into. She wants to be a uniter. She's the person we need as America approaches our 250th anniversary in 2026. We don't need a nation divided. We need a nation united. And that means somebody who speaks to everybody. And that's why conservative Republicans, liberal Democrats, moderates are all flocking to Kamala Harris, including former Vice President Dick Cheney.
On the vice president, you say she is who she is. I think there are a lot of people still in this country who don't know who she is, and we see that in the polling data as well. Is she doing herself a disservice by not doing more interviews, doing more one-on-ones with reporters? How do you respond to that? It's great to speak with you this morning, to have the opportunity to do so, of course, but is she missing an opportunity by not doing more of that herself, do you think?
She's a thoughtful, diligent leader who studies the issues, and she's a prosecutor who put criminals behind bars, stared them in the face. Nothing's harder than that. Look, she is doing more interviews, and I'm sure she'll do even more going forward. She's working very, very hard on the campaign trail, doing far more campaign events and outreach than her opponent. I think that'll help carry the day in November.
Governor, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg this morning. The Governor of Colorado, Jared Polis. Greatly appreciated. Advantage New Haven, if you're in New Haven and you're double E, electrical engineering, you spend a lot of time at Sally's Pizza. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. You're grinding, you're cramming, differential equations, and the rest of it. I assume you took the Wheatstone Bridge to Sally's. What was it like double E at Yale in a school acclaimed for liberal arts? How lonely were you?
We spent a lot of time in a basement away from sunlight.
Yeah. Abe Tarapani with us, I heard this morning on what he's doing in this innovation. Explain to me your innovation project right now at AI.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. So I'm the CEO of Atlas AI. We're a Palo Alto, California-based startup that is building models based on geospatial data. So geospatial is data that has a location or a geographic element associated with it. So our models aim to understand and anticipate what the future of the planet is likely to look like, where people are likely to live in the future, how economy is likely to evolve and adapt in relation to macro factors like conflict or climate change. And we aim to help international organizations.
I would go to climate flooding today, but this morning I have to go to conflict as we consider three wars, Ukraine, Gaza, and north to Lebanon as well. What is your value add to people assessing the conflict in the Levant?
So there are some immediate elements of monitoring the impact of the conflict on the environment itself, but also on communities. How are people being displaced, forced to move from the places that they live because of the nature of the conflict? But more so than that, some of the interesting factors are, how is the conflict impacting the agricultural industry in Ukraine, and what global implications does that have on supply chains that flow from this critical area of agriculture?
Talk about your role in the broader AI sector, if we can christen that or call it that now. I mean, we talk a lot about a handful of companies in particular, talk a lot about chip manufacturing as well. As you look at the sort of nascency, evolution, early evolution of it, where are we in that process now?
So not surprising, a lot of the early focus has been on modalities of information that we work with almost every day. Text, video, imagery.
Tom's phone.
Where to find pizza in New Haven.
Yes.
Some of the interesting next set of questions that we're dealing with relate to different types of data. How do we help organizations understand the information that they have access to that may not be as neatly structured in a document or in an image file? Like satellite imagery is a good example. There is an immense amount of information about economic activity, about the climate, about other dimensions of change that's happening on the planet. And we have satellite images that are capturing every square foot of the planet every single day now. Using AI gives us a real-time lens on what change is unfolding across the planet in a way that some of the other aspects of AI are not able to capture today.
I think that so many of us glom on to kind of the aw shucks factor of the modality that you're talking about, how it can affect our lives individually. Do you think that people, as of yet, comprehend kind of the wider implications of what AI will be able to offer, indeed what it may offer right now?
They're starting to, in part because it's on our phone and we have access to magical technology that allows us to do things that we couldn't do yesterday. The reality is that a lot of this is just scratching the surface of what we're seeing come out of the labs in Stanford and Yale and other schools in terms of not just how individual models, but how models that can reason, that can engage with the world are able to now start to enhance the productivity of companies and organizations.
You are hugely qualified to answer a question that's underscored by
Microsoft,
Microsoft, not pizza related, but Microsoft and Constellation and 3 Mile Island, fine. The thermodynamics of all this AI chit chat and the need for electricity, to me there's almost a free lunch to it. What will be the cost of having to generate all that electricity to power your world?
Well, I think there's probably two questions embedded there. What's the cost and what's the sustainability of being able to do so? And the good news is that from a sustainability angle, we are now seeing the acceleration of new technologies like solar and wind, but also hydrogen and other newer energy sources that are going to be prevalent in the next couple of decades. So the energy demand will be significant, but I'm also very optimistic that this energy will be powered by renewable, sustainable sources of energy.
What do the 7 big stocks, what do they get from you? When you talk to NVIDIA, when you talk to Microsoft, how do they listen to what Atlas AI is doing?
So I'll give you a specific example in that we partner with Google Cloud extensively. Our technology is built on Google Cloud, and we're a member of a sustainability ecosystem within Google Cloud that's focused on questions of how do we help companies advance their sustainability priorities. So Google has Gemini. They have one of the leading large language models, but many of their customers are asking a whole array of questions related to how does Airbus think about anticipating the demand of air travel in Indonesia in the future. And so there are questions that language models are not by themselves able to answer that Atlas AI can.
Atlas AI question, how about that Midtown traffic visit today? What's Google Cloud going to tell me about getting over to lunch?
I wish I could have told you how to get to the east side last night.
Abe, well, let me just stick with infrastructure a little bit here, and we hear from Jensen Huang about how he deploys the chips that his company is making, and there's such demand for them. When push comes to shove, is that a difficulty for folks like you who are starting these businesses in this space, just getting access to the infrastructure, getting the chips, to put it bluntly, getting the access to these data centers? How much of that is yet a hurdle to the kind of development that you'd like to see?
It's a question that we constantly have to face, because not only are we thinking about the current generation of model, but we're also now thinking about next year's generation. The pace of training new models is accelerating at such a pace that you need to be thinking 1 or 2 generations down the line. And with each generation, the compute requirements are increasing exponentially. I'll say that the last few years are likely tougher than the next few years will be. The supply chains are starting to work themselves out. NVIDIA and other companies have been able to now adapt. New generations are coming out that are more efficient. So that's not one of the elements that we worry most about when we think about the next few years' growth of the business.
It's been wonderful. Come to our world headquarters sometime. Love to talk to you from our studios. Abe Tarapani with us with Atlas AI. Finally, for Global Wall Street, an important conversation. You think of the Securities and Exchange Commission in America, FSA in London. How about the International Organization of Securities Commissions, IOSCO? Is that how?
IOSCO, that's
IOSCO,
right. Yeah,
thank you.
IOSCO.
Joining us from IOSCO in Brussels with all the headaches of regulation and cryptocurrency's future, Jean-Paul Servais joins us this morning. Wonderful to have you with us. Different presidential candidates are saying crypto is part of a legitimate American political and economic future. Where does that take our understanding of crypto if we see politicians talking it up?
Yeah, but it's part of the political legitimacy debate. It's about innovation. We as securities market regulator are not against innovation, but our job is to ensure that there is trust, that there are no accidents. And due to the fact that we know that most of the time, in fact, we have a business developed by cross-border, I would say, crypto asset provider, we need to be here. And IOSCO means, in fact, the global membership organization. We have 130 jurisdictions. It means that my colleague and members are involved in the supervision of 95% of the financial, like the US SEC and the US CFTC. So we need to be there, and that's what we did. We endorsed last year a toolkit in order to help all jurisdictions to have an appropriate supervision. It's not about, I would say, enforcement as such. That's the job of the national agency, like in the US. So we try to avoid that there are collapses, that there are accidents, that there are problems about the quality, I would say, of the business. There's
a new legitimacy. Lawrence Fink of BlackRock is talking it up. Everybody else, Eric Balchunas at Bloomberg is encyclopedic on this. That's all great. But how is the Bitcoin underlying that the Bank of International Settlements has studied so hard? Is there an underlying value like there is to gold, or what's the latest stock I have that's cratered? There's something there.
That's a very difficult question, and you are for there, of course, because it's a never-ending story. Our, I would say, objective is to be helpful for discovery price, to avoid, let us be clear, many of the accidents which took place during the crypto meet, it was about the absence of segregation of assets. Something that is quite manageable, I would say, and something that had to be managed for 30 years by trading venues, stock exchange, asset management. What we are proposing is to copy and paste this well-known principle and then to provide that for the sake of the supervision. We're working very hard with the IMF, and I was very happy to see that now the IMF start by using our toolkit when they perform their well-known mission Article 4, FSAP, and so. It means that we are useful and that we are working together with other global standards.
You'll forgive the phrase, but I imagine a lot of your job is herding cats. You're having to deal with all of these regulatory agencies all over the world, some of which have different priorities. How much unanimity is there? You can take crypto as an example and how we've seen this. Maybe arbitrage isn't a good way of putting it, but companies moving from place to place, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, because they offer different things. Are we seeing a movement toward a more unified regulatory landscape?
Yeah. Well, thanks for your question. That's maybe my colleague thought that a Belgian guy had to be elected because the DNA of Belgium is about Belgium compromise, because we are not sure that our country still exists the day after. So we need compromise every day. We never vote. It's like United Nations. Except that I think that we are able to
get things done. Okay.
So it's consensus, because it's a global membership organization. And I think that we are able to find consensus because whenever you have global challenges, risk and opportunity, we are here. Because our members are involved in the supervision of 95%, our majority of members are in fact grow and emerging market. So when we speak about crypto assets, that's a danger also for crypto and an opportunity also for many countries in Africa. The same for climate funds. It's cross-border by definition.
I understand there can be banking transactions, cross-border transactions, but I still don't see out there a lot of use of crypto in day-to-day transactions. Do you envision out there crypto will actually be a day-to-day transaction?
I think that you are right to be prudent. There are many expectations, I think. The first step, if you want to have confidence in crypto, is to have a solid framework at global frame. And that's what we are doing for the time being. And we are going the right direction because I think that our toolkit was able to take into account what happens last year, the crypto winter, some accident, and that's the objective of IOSCO, to be helpful for the members. Like for climate finance, that's the reason why I have the pleasure to be here in New York.
Let's pull back a bit as you look at the broader landscape. Are there pockets of risk or things that give you pause for concern at this point in time when it comes to sort of the regulatory risk, regulatory landscape?
Yeah. As IOSCO chair, I think that there are two global issues: climate finance and BFI, the former shadow banking. Climate finance, if you are not able to speak more or less the same language, to use the same, I would say, sustainability reporting standard, to gather data as much as possible, and that's the reason why the initiative taken by Michael Bloomberg and Emmanuel Macron is going in the right direction, to extract data, we will have many questions about greenwashing. Because greenwashing means most of the time the lack of capacity to use the same language. And that's the reason why we endorsed last year ISSB standard. It means at the end of the day, 130,000 companies will use the same standard. It's a giant step, let us be clear. Who could believe that some years ago? And it's a recent one, and it's thanks to the involvement of IOSCO. The same for shadow banking. I would say we know the evolution after the subprime crisis. And we are now working, I would say, very intensely with the BIS, with the FSB. We are reporting to the G20 leaders in order to develop new tools. For instance, we were able, together with the SSB, to publish a useful toolkit for the liquidity of management tool. We are now working on leverage in order to take into account that once if Archegos, the gains and so on. So there is always something to learn, I would say, and then to make progress about new toolkits.
Thank you so much, Jean-Paul Servais.
Thank you.
With IOSCO. This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, bringing you the best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. You can also watch the show live on YouTube. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to see the show weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern from our global headquarters in New York City. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen, and always on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Terminal, and the Bloomberg Business app.